Nobody knows tomorrow. Knows tomorrow. Knows tomorrow. Only God knows tomorrow. So I don't fear tomorrow.
Yes, yo.
Fear tomorrow. Why should I fear tomorrow? God is my confidence. Holy Father.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my name is Benny Macaulay, and you are currently sitting with me in the Atmos room by Benny Macaulay, and today we are going to be doing the mix breakdown for Lamborghini's Confidence. This is actually a very, very nice record. The production is sick. Now listen to this bass.
Nobody knows tomorrow. Knows tomorrow.
Yeah, this jam is very, very sick. This record was produced by Sun Music. Very, very dope producer, man. So today, as usual, we're going to do a mix breakdown. I'm going to walk you through my process, and hopefully you can pick up one or two things that you can use in your own record. If you've seen any of my mix breakdown before, you know this is how I like to begin. And if this is your first time, I like to start with session organization. It's basically just me arranging my sessions in a way where everything is easily accessible to me. And I have a couple of folders to help me do that. I have the instrumental folder and I have the vocal folder. Within the instrumental folder, we have drums, we have bass, we have melodies. And then if we go down to the vocal folder, we have the lead and then we have the background vocals. Basically, that's it. That's session organization. This is how I like to work. The next thing I typically do once I'm done organizing my session is gain staging. This is very, very important. If this is your first time or if you're just starting out mixing, gain staging is very important because setting your signal to the optimum level is going to affect how your plugins react to that signal. And by that, I mean if your signal is too loud, you turn it down so you have enough headroom to work with, and if it's too quiet, you turn it up so you can hit around say minus 18 dB at least. Do you understand what I'm saying? But that does not mean you cannot break the rules. Sometimes I break the rules myself. The most important thing is you have to make sure you have headroom for whatever it is you want to do. So let's look at the drums real quick. The very first plugin I have here is the trim plugin. Now, this is what I'm using for gain staging. I've turned down the prefader level by minus 13 dB to give me enough headroom to work with. Let's see where that's leaving us. So as you can see, we're picking at minus 17.2 dB here, which is great. So that's the first thing you want to do on all the tracks. Make sure you do your gain staging because you want to make sure you have enough headroom for your processing. And then the next plugin we have is the catch-off EQ. I'm basically just using this to carve out space for the kick to sit within the mix, right? So high pass here up to what? That's 30 Hertz. And the low pass up to 6.5K. As usual, I would do the same for all my drum tracks. Let's get that. You know, gain staging. On this rim, I'm actually turning it up by 1 dB. Like I've said before, gain staging is not all about taking the levels down. Sometimes you need to bring the levels up so you can get optimal level. And that's typically anywhere between minus 18 to minus 15 dB. We have the catch-off EQ as well. Just using this high pass to carve out space. Just make sure you're not changing the sound when you're doing these cuts. For example, if I bypass this EQ, you'll see that we are not affecting the sound whatsoever. Bypass. And then with it on. Right? The sound is still the same, but we've just created space for all the lower frequency elements that need to sit in the lower frequency. This will be changing the sound. All right, you don't want to do that. This continues for all the tracks, right? The drum loops, gain staging. You guys can see again, I'm turning this one up by 2 dB even. We're doing a cut here as well to carve out space. That's pretty much it. And typically once I'm done with all of these, I would route all the drums to my drum bus, which is where I would do the compression. And then I also have a parallel compression drum bus. That's where I'm doing my parallel compression to add punch to the drums. And I also like to do sidechain compression with the kick. So I'm sidechaining the kick to the bass. So when the kick plays, the bass is going to duck, you know, but we'll get there. For now, let's look at the drum bus real quick. Dun, dun, dun. What I try to do here is hit around minus 1 dB of gain reduction. The purpose of this is to glue the drum tracks together and make them sound cohesive. And also amplification, you know. Minus 1 dB there. That's usually more than enough to glue the tracks together and make everything sound cohesive. But this is also based on taste, based on the record you're working on. And if you feel like compressing the drums more will give you a specific sound, then go for it. From my experience, I noticed that if I go beyond minus 1 dB, then you start to lose punch in the drums. And another reason why I like to use this LA2 compressor is because this is an opto compressor. This has a very slow attack. And I like that for drums because my transients will cut through. But again, you might decide that you don't want that for your record and choose to use a compressor that has a faster attack. You get whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. This is what I'm trying to achieve. So let's move on to the bass. I really love this bass. Again, we're starting with gain staging. As you can see, turn down the level by -6 dB. And when I'm talking about turning down the levels I'm talking about during gain staging is the pre-fader level. Now that's the level before any processing that you do. My meter is currently set to the pre-fader level. So what you're seeing right now, these are all pre-fader levels, right? That's why even if I turn this level down to 0, you still see the level, okay? Because this is a pre-fader level. And that being said, after setting your pre-fader level with your gain staging, you still have to balance out the instrument however way you feel is right for the record. I've gotten questions about how to place or where to place the kick and all of that. The kick is sort of the loudest element on this drum mix. As you can see, we have the kick here like -3 dB. These are all based on taste. This is something that will come from listening to a lot of music and understanding what sounds good at what position or at what level, and also based on what the producer wants. Because you might want the rim to be loud and the producer might decide, I don't want the rim to be that loud, I want something else to be loud. You understand what I'm saying? And this is why it's very good to have the reference track. That's a rough mix, because that will give you a good idea of how the producer wants the drums or the entire song actually to sound in terms of the levels of the individual elements of the track. And then you can build up on that to improve the sound essentially. So for the bass, again, staging like I said before, and then we have the EQ, you know.
If you know, you know.
Yeah, I'm just doing the high pass there up to 30 Hz, not much. And then we have neutron compressor, which I'm using for the sidechain. So when the kick hits,
if you know, you know.
Right, when the kick hits,
They call me Lamb.
the bass ducks, right? I think we're getting up to like -6 or maybe -5 dB. Let's see.
If you know, you know.
Yeah, somewhere around there, around -5, but it's pretty quick because I have a very fast attack and very fast release as well, so it's almost not noticeable. We have another bass here.
They wanna know
Hey.
how I keep moving ahead.
Yeah, the same thing, gain staging. But this time around, I'm turning this bass up by 6 dB. Again, we are trying to get the optimal level for our processing.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead. It is because the hand of God is on my head.
Right, so as you can see now we're at -18 dB. Without the gain staging here, this bass will be too low. You don't want your signal to be too quiet and you do not want your signal to be too loud. Very, very important. That's essentially what gain staging is. We have another EQ here to carve out space. We're doing a high pass here as well. We have another bass here, but this time around I'm not doing any, I'm not doing any side chaining. Oh, there's a log drums. Ooh. Sounds very good. So gain staging as well, and then EQ again to carve out space. So like I mentioned before, once I've done the gain staging and then the EQing, I'll route all the bass to the bass bus where I'll do the compression just like I did for the drums. And if we come to the bass bus, you can see that we have the LA2 here as well.
It is show for evidence.
Just slightly above -1 dB there for our compression, and we're doing a bit of saturation here. This is a new fangled saturate, very lovely saturation plugin.
It is show for evidence. God in me is my confidence.
And one thing I like about this plugin is the fact that if I set this to auto, for example, it helps me with gain stage, which means the level going and the level coming out will be the same. So which means you can saturate your signal and still retain your headroom. But I did not use this feature for this track because I felt like the level was good at -13 dB here, as you can see.
It is show for evidence.
And by -13 dB, I'm talking about the loudest point of the bass signal across the track. The log drums is the loudest bass signal in this whole record. And then let's go over to the melodies. We have very few melodies to work with here actually. Oh man, this song is very, very dope. To start with, we have this pad here, right? Beautiful. Gain staging. I'm turning this one up by 3 dB, and we have this EQ to carve out space and target resonant frequencies. Whatever I mix, I like to do more than just carve out space for the melodies, because melodies typically carry a lot of competing frequencies that can mask each other. Unlike drums, that is usually just monotonous. With melodies, you have more polyphonic sound. So as you can see here, I'm doing a bit of cutting here and there to tame resonant frequencies. Let's do a quick A/B and try to listen for the difference. This is the pad before the EQ, and then after the EQ. If you listen for those ringing sound, like oh, you can hear that it's much more cleaner. That's because we've taken those out, or we've tamed them. you know, something like that. But I don't go about trying to take out all the resonant frequencies. I'll listen to see if it's competing with some other instrument within the mix. If it's not, I'm not going to bother myself with it. Because for example, we have something here, like we have this guy here. Typically, this is something that I will take out. Like, listen. That's typically something that I would take out, but I didn't bother with that for this record because I felt like it's not necessarily competing with any other sound within the record. Oh, there's one more thing here though, the doubler. This is something I also like to do with pads a lot. I like to use the doubler to spread the pad in the record, and then I pull back on the center channel so that there's more space for the lead vocal and every other thing to sit there. Because again, they're pads. They're supposed to just fill up the space and not be the main element, but you will still feel them regardless.
If you know, you know.
You know, sounds good. I really like doing this for pads and maybe some strings, you know, some dull strings. Anything that I want to put in the background and still give presence, you know, just push them to the side, essentially. Okay. I love these strings on this record. So again, gain staging, turning this one up as well. And we have the EQ to carve out space and target resonant frequencies. This is actually what takes my time when I'm mixing, because I have to listen for those resonant frequencies that are annoying to me, at least. You know, let's say bypass. And then with the EQ. It just sounds cleaner. You know, when you take out resonant frequencies like that, you instantly get clarity in your mix, essentially. What's this? Ooh. That sounds I really like so much. Gain staging here. This time around, I'm turning it down. And then let's see what we're doing here. Yeah, this sound actually has a lot of resonant frequencies. If I bypass this plugin now, you hear what I'm talking about. You hear those annoying ringing at the very top of the notes there, you know? We don't want those. They are going to make the song sound harsh. So with the EQ, you know, you still get the sound, but now they are controlled. And that's what we're doing for the rest of the record. Let's look at this brass. Gain staging. I'm just turning that by 1 dB. Okay, not much here. So I'm just doing a high pass here up to 36 Hz. Let's bypass this so we can hear the difference without the EQ. And then with the EQ. You know, it just sounds clean. Do you understand what I'm saying?
And I know that is why I'm capable. Calling me is my confidence, and I know that is why I'm capable. They wanna know.
Bro, that's how you do it. And again, after doing all of this, you know, gain staging and EQ it, you still have to set your levels based on what you think will work for the record and also based on what the producer wants. It's a collaborative effort. You understand? Again, that's why reference tracks are very important. So yeah, we're doing the same for the rest of the melodies. You know? Oh, I like the sound.
Many challenges trying to pull me down, but I know.
So that's that. That's basically how I mix instrumentals. So like I said, I do my gain staging, I do my EQ into carve out space and take resonant frequencies, and then I route all the tracks to the buses where I do the compression. So we have the drum bus, we have the parallel drum bus. I think I failed to touch on this one.
They wanna know.
Basically, I'm just using that to add extra energy to the drums. This is the drums without parallel compression.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
Right, and then with the parallel compression on.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
You know, it's crazy. I'm going to leave a link here on how to do parallel compression and explain how it works if you really want to go into it and you don't have an idea yet. But you can see that it's very important for anything you want to add energy to. Say you want to add energy to like your lead vocal, for example, and you're not getting that energy from your compression, you can use parallel compression to do that. So like I said, I do my gain staging, I do my EQing, and then I route all the instruments to their respective buses. We have the drums going to the drum bus. That's where I'm doing my compression. Bass bus, I'm doing my compression there as well. Melody bus, and I'm doing my compression.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
And like I said, I like to target maximum 1 dB of gain reduction. This 1 dB of gain reduction is for the loudest parts of the collective melody.
God in me.
So as you can see there, 1 dB at the loudest part of the melodies. So let's go over to the vocals, which in my opinion is sort of like the most important part of the record actually. I think a lot of artists will listen to their vocals first, would listen to the instrumentals, and then producers will listen to instrumentals first, would listen to vocals. It's crazy, but yeah. But let's start with the lead vocals. This is how I like to approach mixing vocals. I like to just do my gain staging on the track itself, pitch correction on the track itself as well. So as you can see, we have the trim plugin here. I'm turning this down to minus 15 dB to get good enough headroom because these vocals are very, very hard. And ignore the wave size. This is something I just like to do. I like to increase the wave size so I can see what I'm working on. This does not necessarily determine the level of the vocals, right? It's just the wave size. And then we have the wave tune real time for pitch correction.
God in me is my confidence, and I know.
And I'm going to leave a video here on how to use this plugin. I actually made a video a while back. If you're not used to using this waves tune plugin, you should get some useful information from that video. So this is what I like to do on the main track itself, and then the rest of the processing happens in the vocal bus. Except I need to do some radio effect, but I want to use the doubler to spread the track, then you know I'll put that directly on the track itself. So let's go over to the lead vocal bus and see what we're working with. So the first plugin here is the Waves NS1 noise suppressor. This is just to capture any noise that might be in the vocals, and I've since changed though. To be honest, I don't know why I'm using this here. Now I prefer using the Clarity VX Pro because it sounds very, very good. And you have this whole, what you might call it, let me show you. Yeah, so you have the advanced features or advanced controls that lets you focus your noise suppression on specific frequency range, and then it starts to work like DSR even, you know, and then you get a much more cleaner sound, especially when you do this around this 10K and up.
God in me is my confidence, and I know that is why I'm capable. God in me.
Just bypass it.
God in me. God in me.
You understand? It just sounds a bit cleaner if you ask me.
God in me is my confidence, and I know that is why I'm capable.
Anyways, that's by the way. And then the next plugin here is the Catcher of EQ. This is what I'm using to tame resonant frequencies in the vocals or whistling points. Basically all the things that I don't want to get to the compressor, because once they get to the compressor and I compress them, they're going to be annoying to the ears. So if I solo one of these, you're going to hear how these resonant frequencies sounds. You hear that? Whistling points, we don't want them in the vocals. You see, I have a lot of nodes, a lot of points here. I like to take my time and just go in there and just clean out what I think would not be necessary for the record. And as you can see, most of these EQ points have very, very tight Q. So I'm really, really focusing on the annoying frequencies themselves. Let's do a bypass.
God in me.
And then
God in me.
it just sounds cleaner. And then the next plugin here is the Nectar DS. This is just to capture the first stage of my sibilants that will be in the vocals.
God in me. It's my confidence, and I know.
I don't do too much at this stage.
God in me.
You know, Nectar DS is very, very straightforward and easy to use. I like to set the plugin to capture sibilants from 3K and up. And then what do we have here? We have the SSL E channel strip. This is where I start to shape the tone of the vocals. We're going to work from the top to the bottom. So on the very, very top here, this is the high frequency. We're doing a boost up to, I don't know, let's call it minus 2.5 dB. I've said this many times, this plugin doesn't necessarily have numbers, so you have to use your ears and make sure whatever setting you're setting is based on what you actually want to hear, which is great. So we're doing like 2.5 dB boost here around 16K just to add brightness to the vocals. And then on high mid frequency, we are doing around say minus 2 dB cut around 3 kilohertz. And this is a very, very wide Q. That's to target harsh frequencies in the vocals. Typically that's where they sit. And then on the low mid frequency, we're doing a cut around, let's call this 750 hertz up to minus 13, minus 14 dB cut there. And this is a much tighter Q. But honestly, these days I like to do wider Q. I think the wider Q sounds better. But for this record though, I mean, it worked. You know, let's listen to the difference.
God in me.
See?
It's my confidence, and I know that is why I'm capable. God in me. It's my confidence.
You see, with the wider Q, you get a much more cleaner sound.
God in me. It's my confidence, and I know that is why I'm capable.
I would advise that if you are mixing your record moving forward and you're using this plugin, always set your low mid frequency Q to a wider Q. It just helps your vocals sit better into the mix. I don't know, it sounds really good to me anyways. Down to the low frequency, we're doing up to say minus 13 dB cut around 200 hertz. Now this is usually what I will use to like control the amount of low frequency I want in the vocals. If I want more, just push it up.
It's my confidence.
If I want less, you know, you just take it out.
God in me.
I mean, depending on the kind of song you're mixing, you know, sometimes you want less low frequency and sometimes you want more. So yeah, that's that. And then the next plugin on the vocal chain is the 1176 compressor. The purpose of this compressor is to tame picks. Sometimes I like to do a much faster attack, but a lot of times I like to set my attack to slow so that I get more of the transient cutting through, right? And again, like I said, this is not where I'm doing my mid compression, I'm just targeting picks.
God in me. It's my confidence, and I know that is why I'm capable. Nobody knows tomorrow, knows tomorrow, knows tomorrow. Only God knows tomorrow. So God in me is my confidence, and I know that is why I'm capable. If you know, you know.
Oh boy. Right. Right, so I typically just dial. Like I said, I typically just have a slow attack, very fast release, ratio is set to 4, and I dial in the compression by driving the input till I get just a little bit of movement on the needle here. But sometimes if the singing doesn't have very, very peaky performance, you know, like when the artist is screaming at some part, then I might not even push it to where I start to get any compression at all. This will just be on my chain to provide some of this 1176 sound. Do you understand what I'm saying? And get some amplification to replace the level that we've lost from the EQ and we've done before we hit this compressor. And that's basically how I like to use this. And this is a fixed threshold compressor, which means the more you drive in the input, the more compression you get. And the next plugin on the vocal chain is the C6 multiband compressor. This greatly contributes to the tone of the vocals as well. If I bypass this, for example, you hear the difference. So before.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
And then it's with the multiband compressor.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
You can hear how the vocals just sit in the music and it sounds very, very rich. I'm going to leave a link here on how to do this from scratch. This is very, very useful if you're trying to get a good sounding vocal. Whatever you're going to learn from that link on this compressor is something that you can apply to any multiband compressor. It's the same process regardless. I love the C6 multiband compressor because you can set the behavior to opto, which allows it to sort of behave like an opto compressor, which means very slow attack characteristics, and it's smooth and it's transparent. You get a nice thickness in your mid range, which is great. And then the next plugin here is the LA2A compressor. This is where I do the main compression for the vocals.
They wanna know.
Yes, you can see I'm hitting up to minus 5 dB of gain reduction, and this is where I like to compress as hard as I need to for the record. So I like to aim between minus 3 to minus 5 dB. Sometimes I'll hit to minus 7 for rap.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
Right. Again, this is a very easy compressor to work with. It's an opto compressor, so very slow attack, around 10 milliseconds. And you dial in your peak reduction and your gain to taste. I don't necessarily do gain matching in my mixes. I just dial in as much gain that is needed for the record without any digital distortion. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's how I like to work. And then the next plugin here, which is the last plugin before we hit the time-based effect, is the SPL DSR. This is what I use to control all the sibilance that might have built up due to the process we've done, as well as control the warmth and sharpness of the vocal. So what I mean by that is this: if I want the vocal to sound warmer, I just increase the S reduction.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
Right? And if I want it to sound sharper, then I reduce the S reduction.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
essentially. The setup for this is quite simple. I'll just set this to auto threshold. I set the DSR to mid and side, and the DSR just does this thing. It's actually quite amazing and sounds very good. So that's it. Let's move to the time-based effect. So I have a few sends here, as you can see. First one is going to the room reverb, and I'm using UAD's pure plate for that.
They wanna know.
Again, the room reverb is not something that you're supposed to hear. It's supposed to serve like a cushion between the vocal and the beat. Somebody actually described it very nicely in the comments one time. It said it's supposed to just latch with the vocals, which is great. And then we have our main reverb sound, which is going to the reverb bus, and I'm using the hit reverb for that. All we're doing here, just making sure we have the correct reverb time. I like to use the EQ to do high pass and low pass filter, so that way you get a much more cleaner reverb sound. You know, you don't get all of this low end rumble and all of the sharpness from the highs. And then I have a Tube Tech compressor here that I'm using to do sidechain compression.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
It's very nice to get more reverb in your mix without it affecting the clarity of the vocals. So basically what happens is, as the vocal plays, the reverb is going to duck down, and then when the vocal stops playing, the reverb will shine into the mix. Do you understand? Typical sidechain compression thing.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
Sounds good. And as you can see, I actually created the sidechain compression vox send for that, but typically that's not really necessary, because you can actually just use the existing vocal bus, any of these ones here. And then we have a delay send, which is going to stereo delay here.
They wanna know.
Right, I'm using the comeback kit delay. This is my favorite delay for mixing vocals. It just sounds great. I'm doing the same EQ thing here as well at the top, and then we have the sidechain as well.
They wanna know how I keep moving ahead.
All right, so let's move on to the background vocals.
Rise up and praise it, sing loud and praise it, what rise and praise it. Rise up and praise it, sing loud and praises, what rise and praises, greetings and praises.
Sounds very good. So usually the process is a little bit similar to that of the lead vocals. We have the same plugins in the background vocal chain, right? So let's look at this. Typically I like to do more cuts on the low mid frequency and the low frequencies, and then the C6 multiband compressor settings as well would be a little bit different. I'm doing less boost for the highs here, and then I'm doing less compression for the highs as well. But that's also because before the vocals hit the background vocal bus, they are also going through this background vocal summing bus, and this bus has this multiband compressor here, and I'm doing multiband compression around 3K to, let's say, 7.5K. And the purpose of this is to ensure that the background vocals constantly sit underneath the lead vocals.
Rise up and praise, sing loud and praises, what rise and praises, greetings and praises. Rise up and praise.
So even though we have the choir singing and just screaming in the mix, you still have the lead as the lead, because this is constantly putting the background vocals underneath the lead.
Rise up and praise, sing loud and praises, what rise and praises, greetings and praises. Rise up and praise, sing loud and praises.
And the setting for this is quite simple actually. Short ratio. We don't want too much compression to where you start to hear it. Very fast attack and very slow release. So when that compression happens, it holds onto the compression. And then you drop your threshold as much as you need to. And then as usual, I will set my compression a bit differently.
Rise up and praise, sing loud and praise.
Like I mentioned before, the purpose of the 1176 is to tame our peaks.
Rise up and praise, sing loud and praise.
So you see that when it goes yo, 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 the compressor is active, and then when we get to the yo, 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 the quiet performance, you don't get any compression at all. We're just taming peaks. And then we have our main compression.
Rise up and praise, sing loud and praise, what rise and praises, greetings and praises.
I'm doing about -3 dB of gain reduction here. Sometimes I will go down to 7. And then we have the SPL DSL as well, controlling the warmth of the vocals like we did with the lead. And then let's move on to the time-based effects. We also have the room reverb. This is also going to the pure plate. We have a very big reverb send. This is going to our very big reverb aux track, which has the Valhalla vintage verb as well as the neo verb. I know you're probably confused by that. Anyways, I have more than one very big reverb aux tracks, as you can see, V, B1, 2, and 3. And I'm combining both reverb sounds from the neo verb and the Valhalla vintage verb to get the reverb sound that you are hearing on these background vocals. Is it necessary? No. but it's just something I picked up from my scavenging of the internet, and I kind of like the way it works. And then we also have the Tube Tech compressor here as well, and I'm sidechaining the lead vocal to the reverb of the background vocals, because at some point the lead vocal plays at the same time as the background vocals. This is also something that will help the lead vocals continue to stand out in the mix. And then what else do we have here? We have the delay send, which is going to our Nectar delay. It's a very nice simple delay. Then we have the chorus send, which is going to the chorus aux track, which has the doubler. I've taken off the center channel. So what I'm doing with this is essentially just adding some more side information to the mix. It does help to give the background vocals an extra sense of width. Wait, let me see if we can hear the difference. I wouldn't mute that. And then I don't know if you can hear that, but it feels very, very rounded, and I really, really like that. So that's essentially everything I've done for this mix as far as the instrumental and the vocals goes. Now we're going to do a quick walkthrough down the mastering chain. I like to master in my mix session because for me that's a better way to work. Because if I need to do any adjustments in the mix, I can just quickly go back to wherever I need to do the adjustment. So my mastering chain, I have the VU meter at the very top. This is just helping us to check our levels visually. With the VU meter, I make sure I don't exceed 0 essentially, because that means I have more than enough headroom to work with. And then the next plugin on the mastering chain is the Ozone 11. This does a couple of things for me. The first, I have this dynamic EQ here to target resonant frequencies. At this point, I'm just nitpicking. You know, I'm just listening for anything that is like annoying. You know, most of the time there's actually nothing, but I'm just trying to make sure I have a very, very clean signal before I go into compression. But one more thing I need to mention is the fact that, as you can see, we have mids and we have sides. So what I'm doing here with this EQ moves is focusing on the mids. And then we have another EQ here, and I'm just doing a 1 dB boost around 60 Hz to just add extra punch to the low end essentially. Mostly around the kick, to be honest. And then we have the E major. I like this E major a lot because you have crossover points, which means you can set your stereo width differently for different frequency range. So I like to do more spread on the high frequencies, which is around 8K and up. That's where I do more of the stereo widening. And then let's call this the high mids. So from 1.8K to 8K, I like to do just a little bit of stereo widening, not so much. Let's call this low mids. From 100 to 1.8K, I don't do any stereo widening there. I don't touch that. If I need to do any stereo widening around that range, I'll go do it from the mix itself by maybe panning something. And then for the lows, that's 100 and below, I like to make that narrow so that I can get more punch for the kick and the bass. It's like this upside down triangle. That's how I like to do my stereo widening. Let's actually bypass the ozone and hear the difference that this makes to the record. So bypass. And then if you can't hear anything, at least you can hear that width. And then the next plugin here is the SPL PQ. This is where I like to shape the tone of the entire record. So for this record, I'm doing a 2 dB boost around 61 Hz. For the low mid, I'm doing a cut up to -1 dB around 205 Hz. I'm not doing it to the mid frequencies. And then for the high mid, I'm doing a boost up to 1 dB around 2.6K. You know, just to add a little bit more snap to the snares and stuff like that. And then for the high frequency, I'm doing a boost up to 2 dB around 18 kHz to add that brightness to the entire song. And then the next plugin on the mastering chain is the SPL Ion. This is where I'm doing my final glue compression for the entire song, and I usually aim for 1 dB of gain reduction again. You know, almost 1 dB there. But the setting is quite straightforward, very, very slow attack, so the transit can cut through, very fast release. Then we have our output to set the makeup gain. There's some features that this plugin has that I actually really like this air bass. But for this track, I bypassed it. But typically, this actually gives a lot of thickness to your low end. Let's even try it. So. I mean, you can hear the difference, but I felt like this record did not necessarily need all that bass. I can bet you that I use it for 90% of tracks that I work on. What else do we have here that I like? We have the sidechain filter, which I've set to 90 Hz. So this is going to make sure that the compressor is not being triggered by the lower frequencies. So that way we get a much more transparent and even compression across the entire song. That's everything I'm doing here. And then the next plugin here in the mastering chain is the black bus saturator for that juicy saturation. This I like to set to flat so that I have even saturation saturation across the entire song. Saturation is 50%, pentode 50 going into triode at 50%. I'm setting the air to 40% for this record. Sometimes I do less. The air just basically adds air to the entire song. But most importantly, I like to do parallel processing with this plugin. So that means I've set the mix to 50%. So we have the saturation affecting 50% of the signal, and the other 50% is just the same way it is from the compression and EQ we've done before it hits this compressor, and that blends together to continue down the mastering chain. I don't know if that makes sense. However, let's bypass this as well so we can hear the difference that this is making. So bypass.
Rise up, I'm praising, sing loud and praise you.
And then
Rise up, I'm praising, sing loud and praise you. World rise and praise you.
you know, sounds very good. You immediately start to hear a finished record. And then the next plugin on the mastering chain is BX Clipper. So at this point, we're just clipping off those picks so that when we get to our limiting, we're going to be getting a much more transparent sound, and we're not going to be doing a lot of heavy limiting to be able to get a louder signal. So I like to set my ceiling to -2 dB here. Knee is 4.
Sing loud and praise you. World rise and praise you.
So depending on the song I'm working on, usually I'll aim for around -1 dB of gain reduction here. But I also like to set this to diode. Diode sounds warmer to me at this. So this is FET.
Rise up, I'm praising, sing loud and praise you. World rise and praise you. Breathe.
And that's diode. It just sounds warmer, so I like diode. Very straightforward, not much is happening here. And this leads us to the newfangled saturate, where we are doing our saturation.
Rise up, I'm praising, sing loud and praise you. World rise and praise you. Greetings and praise you. Rise up, I'm praising, sing loud and praise you.
As you can see, I'm not doing heavy limiting here. We're at -3 dB of gain reduction, which is actually quite nice. I have the true peak limiting turned on, and I have the transient emphasis turned up to 70% to give us more snap in the entire song. My ceiling is set to -0.5 dB. This is a very, very nice sounding and very effective limiter. If you've not tried this, I think you should try it. It's very, very easy to use. And let's check out where we are landing with the LUFS with this master.
Rise up, I'm praising, sing loud and praise you. World rise and praise you. Greetings and praise you. Rise up, I'm praising, sing loud and praise you. World rise and praise you.
We're at -9 dB LUFS, -9.6 actually, and then our true peak is at -0.6, which is actually quite nice. The true peak limiting on this limiter is actually quite nice and transparent. It doesn't affect the sound, it's just clean, and that's why I like to use it. So that's it for this one. I hope you got something from this, and if you did, make sure you leave me a like and subscribe if you've not subscribed to the channel, alright? And if you'd like to book my services for mixing and mastering, I'm going to leave a link below to the engineers page, or you can hit me up on Instagram at BennyMacaulayDB. And if you'd like to buy my vocal and mastering preset and my mixing and mastering template for Logic and Pro Tools, I'm going to leave a link below as well. I have not officially announced this yet, but if you go to my website, which I'm going to leave the link below, theatmosroombbm.com, there's a free vocal preset for FL Studio users and Logic Pro users. So if you watch this video to this point, I guess this is your extra reward for watching to this point, alright? So that's going to be for now. I shall see you on the next one. Benny Macaulay, out.
God in me is my confidence, and I know